You don't love yourself enough, or you'd be running to do as your nature demands. This comes to us from Marcus Aurelius. And if you know anything about Marcus Aurelius's meditations, then you know that it was a journal. So he was saying this to himself, that he didn't love himself enough, or he would be running to do as his nature demands. And I believe nowadays most people don't love themselves enough to do as their nature demands. Now, what is nature? Obviously, in today, if you talk about nature, it's like trees, the woods. I mean, just nature. Um, and when the Stoics use the term nature a lot, and when they use the term nature, I think sometimes they mean, nature, but other times they're talking about a different type of nature. Talking about human nature, nature of the universe, living in accordance with nature. Living in accordance with nature doesn't mean living off the land. It means living in accordance with what you know you must be doing, what you know you must do to help the hive. Marcus Aurelius says, if it doesn't, what doesn't hurt the hive can't hurt the bee, and basically saying that us humans are one whole. We're one big whole, and if something happens to you, but the hive, the whole human race wasn't hurt by it, then it's not bad. The Stoics talk a lot about nature, and I've thought a lot about what they mean. Epictetus talks about living in accordance with nature so often. He says, you're not doing well because you're not living in accordance with nature. Marcus Aurelius tells him to, like I said, love yourself enough or you'd be running to do what your nature demands. And for a while, I was wondering what this means. And people have their own opinions about what this things like this mean, but I think it's very valuable to formulate your own opinions, especially on things, on philosophies that are 2,000, 2,500 years old, because we don't really have a definition, I would say, of nature from one of the founding Stoics. So we just have context, and it's like with the Bible. People interpret the text differently, and I think it's valuable to make your own interpretation, especially of something like Stoicism that was founded 2,500 years ago. And I believe, like I was saying, I believe nature is what you know you must do. I feel like so often, at least I know what I should do, and I still won't do it. I know I shouldn't hit snooze again, and I should just get up, but I hit snooze again. I know I shouldn't partake in this activity for pleasure because all it is for pleasure's sake. There's no benefit other than a little bit of pleasure and then it's gone. But I'll still, embark on that pleasure and then have to deal with the repercussions of that for, hours, days, really for the rest of your life because you can't change the past. So, even though I shouldn't do blank, you shouldn't drink tonight because it's going to affect you tomorrow, but you still drink. Or you shouldn't smoke because you're going to forget what you learned today and you're just going to turn into a useless blob, but you still smoke. You're trying to, you're made a promise to yourself to quit an addiction, whatever it may be, and you're doing well, and then you give in to the addiction. You don't love yourself enough because you know what you should do. You know what would benefit you in the long run, but you give in. You give in and you don't live in accordance with your nature. You don't live in accordance with the things that you know you must do. And I've always felt like I knew what I should do, I know what I should do most of the time. And the hard part is actually doing it. I recently made a video talking about, what happens if you wished for wisdom and you actually got it and you obtain wisdom. And I was saying how I don't think life would be that easy because you you'd have the knowledge of the right thing to do, but then you'd have to do it. And that's the hard part. The hard part is actually doing what you know you should do. And I think a lot of people know what they should do in most situations, and the hard part's actually doing it and not rationalizing and coping with the lazy alternative. I believe everyone, I mean, obviously I can't speak for other people, but I believe that most people have this, innate sense of what is right and what is best for them to do, and they don't always listen to it. And I think Marcus Aurelius had it too, because he has a line in Meditations, and he says, "Stop arguing what a good man should be one." And I think he would, like what so much of us do nowadays is, what do I need to do? And you start contemplating it and reverse engineering, what other people who are good do and all these things. But at the end of the day, you know what you need to do. And the problem and the reason you're looking so deep is because it's hard. It's hard and it's uncomfortable and it's different and you don't want to do it. So I think we try to rationalize with ourselves that that's not it. It's actually something over here that I feel a lot more comfortable doing that doesn't take me outside of my comfort zone and so on and so forth. But so often I believe, and this is the tricky part, is living in accordance with nature, with your own nature, is not easy. It's not easy. Usually you have to do the hard stuff. Usually you have to do the stuff you don't want to do, but you know you must do. And I feel like earlier I was thinking about this and I thought, it's weird that we're not just our like true authentic selves. It's weird that we don't just inherently live in accordance with nature because obviously everyone wants what's best for them. At least I believe that, and I believe no soul is willingly deprived of the truth. So it's interesting. You want what's best for you. You know what you should do, but you don't do it. It's paradoxical, but often philosophy is paradoxical. And I believe that's just has to do with how you were raised and how this world corrupts you. The world, you're trying to be your true authentic self, and the world tells you no. The people around you tell you no, and you get mixed signals. You might act, and then inside you feel good, but then the world points at you and says no. And as social creatures, social beings, that's hard. That's hard to deal with, especially when you're a kid. As you get older and you realize, no one really knows what they're doing, and the top of the line information 100 years ago, is basically trash nowadays. In terms of medicine and what you should do, and there's a lot of stuff that doctors used to prescribe people like 100 years ago. Therapy, so on and so forth, medicine, and it turns out it was like the complete opposite of what these people needed. Um, for example, one thing that just comes to my mind is Ernest Hemingway. I'm pretty sure he struggled with mental health his whole life. Well, he did. I'm not pretty sure, but I'm pretty sure that um, at the time they thought how to deal with his condition was like shock therapy. So he was getting sessions of shock therapy. And yeah, it sounds like what it is. You get shocked. And now it turns out that that's horrible, and that's probably why he killed himself. So it's like 100 years ago, if you told a doctor that shock therapy is stupid and it's like the worst thing you could do for someone, they'd throw a bunch of studies at you and throw their PhD at you. But nowadays, a doctor will tell you shock therapy is stupid and throw a bunch of studies at you and throw his PhD at you. So it's the same person with the same credentials, but they're giving you two different opinions. And then 100 years from now, it's probably going to be different. And 100 years from now, it's probably going to be different again. So it's once you realize that so many people don't know anything, everyone, no one knows much for sure. Everyone thinks they know, but they don't really know. And once you get to that conclusion, then you can actually start living in accordance with yourself and realizing that the only thing that really matters is being your true authentic self. And what this world thinks of you doesn't really matter. But when you're a kid, that's so hard, and you get stained with all these habits that aren't your true self. And after a while, it's hard to distinguish from what's actually your true authentic self and what are just habits you've formed to cope with not being who you need to be, not being who you want to be. And the only reason you partake in these is because it numbs you to the fact that you're living outside of accordance with yourself. And I think that's why it's so hard nowadays. And it's so, you may be shy because you were raised to be fearful. You were raised to be cautious, to be timid. You were raised by fearful people, and you grew up, afraid, and you grew up shy. And now you realize that your true authentic self is not shy. Your true authentic self actually doesn't like being shy because it's hard for them to, spread love, spread light. And now you have to battle with that. You want to go tell the random person to have a great day, and your true authentic self tells you to do that. But the habits you formed throughout your life and the way you were raised tells you, don't do that. Like, why you got to go put yourself out there? You're shy. What if the person, is having a bad day and yells at you, or you know what I mean? So many different potential things that could happen, and then your brain just runs, and then you end up not spreading love and light, even though your true authentic self wants you to. And that's how you would love yourself. That's how you would gain your own approval, from living in accordance with your nature, doing the hard thing, even though maybe society says it's the wrong thing, or maybe just how you were raised and your habits say that it's the wrong thing. But I did some thinking about this earlier, and I think that's a big reason, because it's hard to explain why people aren't their true authentic selves, especially when no one's willingly deprived of the truth, and everyone knows that. I guess not everyone knows, but I think a lot of people, if you ask them, would say, yeah, being my true self would be better than not being my true self. And that's why to be your true authentic self and to live in accordance with nature nowadays is so hard, because we have so many bad habits and so many things we need to change about ourselves to become our true selves. And there's so many things that we do that numb who we truly are, and we don't even allow ourselves times to contemplate and think about who we really are. Nowadays the phone is just at everyone's hip. You're either working or doing something, and then the second you get some spare time, the phone comes right out, and you're either on social media, you're texting somebody, calling somebody, you know, whatever it may be on your phone. And that's dangerous. It's dangerous to just, go through your life without contemplation, reflection, and examination. Socrates tells us the unexamined life is not worth living. And so many lives nowadays are unexamined because of the phone. Even, the phone is the best and the worst thing I think that has ever happened to mankind. Because with discipline, the phone isn't the enemy. The phone with discipline is a amazing tool. The tool of information, the tool of insight you have at your fingertips. The books of, all these books right here. All these books. There's more books outside of the frame you can't see. Um, but that all is in my little, you know, like 7x4, 7x3, 4-inch phone. All of that's in there. All these big, bulky books that are hard to transport and get around, they're all on the phone. And millions of books, millions of articles, millions of so many things, from, the thoughts of Marcus Aurelius to the thoughts of Albert Einstein, to videos on people's interpretations of them, to world maps, to, you think it, you really, your phones, if you think it, you can probably look it up and figure it out on your phone. Recently, um, it doesn't really go with this video, but I'll make it quick. Recently, I've been having crazy dreams, and I've been wondering why. Because I have pretty crazy dreams. Like throughout my life, but they'll go in and out. There'll be times where I don't dream a lot, and there'll be times where I'm dreaming like every night, and I have like a dream world, and I keep going back to the same places, and I've had lucid dreams before too, where you become conscious in your dream and you can like change the realm. That's pretty cool. Um, but I was wondering why. I was like, why? And I started realizing I was like, every time, because I started fasting, like intermittent fasting, and every time I don't eat like 3 to 4 hours before I go to bed, I have a crazy dream. And I looked it up, and it's like, yeah, if you have low blood sugar, your brain is more active in REM sleep, and you'll dream more. And it's like just like that, my thought got confirmed, and now I know that's why. And back in the day, that would only be a theory. There'd be a theory that why I dream. I mean, I guess it still is a theory, um, but it's backed up by the internet, and we all know the internet's always right. So, but yeah, it's a little side note. But yeah, your phone is an amazing tool, but it also has made people more miserable than ever, I believe. Addictions to, you know, horrible, horrible things. Um, you know, People have killed themselves over what people have said over the phone to them. And in real life, I don't know if you notice this, but people aren't as mean as they are on the phone. A keyboard warrior is truly a real thing. And people talk crap online, for like it's you think if you met these people in life, that's all they do, and then you meet them and they're actually a pretty nice, genuine person. But the phone, it just gives you, your safe little area. Right now I could text out a bunch of hate stuff on a bunch of people's pages, and probably depending on how famous they are, see zero of those consequences. And maybe they can see it and they would be upset about it. And it's not right, and it's not good. And you have the addiction, like I was saying earlier. People, every spare second looking at your phone, always feeling the need to be your brain be stimulated. Everyone's dopamine's all over the place. People are sitting down, with their families and they're not even conversating. They're just looking at their phones. You know, you've seen the videos of the little kids in their sleeps and they're just like tapping a screen. Like there's like a couple-year-old kids who are just already have these habits of the phone, of screens, and it's dangerous. It's very dangerous. The phone needs to be regulated more, I believe. You know, kids shouldn't get phones super young. There should be, I don't know, it's hard because it's like, you know, we live in America, or at least I live in America, and it's like, you know, freedom is the whole thing. And it kind of makes you question freedom because it's almost like people can't handle freedom. You know, a truly free individual is only as free as the extent of his own self mastery. And most people nowadays have no self mastery. You know, they just give in to every pleasure, every self indulgent. You know, everyone nowadays, you know, has a nicotine addiction, you know, has a vape on them 24/7, or they drink every night, or they smoke weed, or, you know, they're on their phone constantly. It's like, you know, you're only as free as the extent of your own self mastery, and no one has self mastery. So it's interesting, you know, it's like maybe, you know, maybe it's hard to say because it's like you don't, it's a fine line because you want to give people freedom, but it's like I don't believe soda should even exist. But it's like if you take away soda, I mean, you're taking away people's freedom. And there's people who have a healthy relationship with soda. You know, there's people who can have a soda once a year, you know, at a, you know, say Thanksgiving, and they enjoy it. They don't feel too bad. You know, they didn't rot their brain. They're just, it was one soda once a year, you know, 200 calories. It's not that big of a deal. But people who have, you know, three, four sodas a day, you know, they're killing themselves. It's liquid death. And, you know, a part of me thinks that we should just get rid of all this stuff because people can't handle freedom. People can't handle this. They don't have discipline. And you can't give people, you know, a phone with unlimited power and then all this junk food because they can't control themselves. And it's clear. It's clear about the obesity problem in America. You know, people cannot control themselves. They have no discipline. They are not free because they have no self mastery. You know, ask a person if they're free, and if they say yes, I mean, don't actually do this, but I mean, just think. Imagine you ask someone if they're free, and they tell you, "Yeah, you know, I live in America. I'm free." And you say, "Okay, no more soda for a year." You know, they'd freak out. They're not free. They're dependent on so many external things. Tell them that the NFL season is going to take a break this year, and they're in shambles. They're, you know, their life's over. They have hours, they have days of free time because they're not going to be groveling over fantasy football and watching games. You know, they're going to be forced to have to spend time with their kids and, you know, actually and read books. Like what? How horrible! You know, it's insane to me. And I'm kind of getting off the topic, but you know, that's kind of the nature of these videos now. It's just kind of going where they go. Start off with a point, and then wherever it goes, it goes. But I mean, it still contributed to my point about how it's so hard for people to know their true nature because they just numb everything. They numb everything. You know, they have a job they hate, and instead of spending a day, you know, in the mountains, you know, contemplating on what they should do with the rest of their life because they're gonna die soon, they say, well, you know, I'll watch football. You know, I'll deal with work on Monday. I'll just watch football today and, you know, jump up a couple times, eat about 4,000 calories of carbs, and, you know, wake up with my stomach hurting and my head hurting because I drank too much and ate too much. It's like, it's insane. It's insane. Um, and that's why you don't love yourself enough. because you don't do what your nature demands of you, and you don't even try to figure it out. Often the hardest thing you that you the hardest thing you need to do that you're pushing off is the exact thing you need to do. So often. And if you ask yourself, what am I pushing off right now? What is the hardest thing? Either a conversation, an addiction, a habit. Ask yourself what it is. I'm sure something will come to your mind. Like I said, either a conversation, a habit, an addiction, something. Something will come to your mind. And that's where you need to start. It's not going to be easy, like I said. It's not like it's going to be sunshine and rainbows trying to lose 200 pounds. But I can almost guarantee you that you'll fall in love with it if you're doing it properly. You're actually you actually know what you're doing, and you're not just starving yourself. You're going to the gym, you're slowly losing the weight so it stays off, and you're making lifestyle changes so you don't lose 100 pounds and gain 100 pounds back. Because there's no point. I mean, you tried, but it's like you need to understand you need to make a lifestyle change. But that's where you need to start. And if you love yourself enough, you will. I feel like a lot of people think, this would have been great for me to do, back then, but it's so late now. Like, what's the point? And I try to tell myself is because I'm only 22 and I feel that way about like everything. Everything you start doing, you start thinking about how this would have been so much better if I started earlier. And the best time to start was back then, but the second best time is right now. And that's what I always tell myself. The best time to start, reading would have been when I was, younger, when I was like probably like sub 10, but I hated reading. I never read a book I liked until I was like 20. And I wish I read more when I was younger. I wish I had journals from when I was younger. I don't remember a lot of my youth for various reasons. Um, and I wish I had journals. I wish I had read. I wish all these things, but I didn't let that tear me down at 20. I started reading and I started journaling. And then now I have 2 years of reading and journaling under my belt. And I'm so glad I do. And I'm so glad I didn't say, well, it's too late. I'm already behind the curve. I graduated school. I dropped out of college. What's the point of reading? What's the point of writing? I didn't like it in school. Why am I going to like it outside of school? But, I didn't do that. I heard people I looked up to and wise people talking about how valuable books were. And I said, well, you want to be like these people, you got to act like these people. You got to do what these people do. So I decided I needed to start reading books. So that's what I did. And I figured out the stuff I like through trial and error. I don't like fiction books. I like nonfiction books. I like philosophy. I like I like books of that nature. And the school never introduced me to that. I never had a philosophy class. Outside of history class, I never read a nonfiction book. And even history class, I didn't really read a nonfiction book. It was just history. It was just study books about history and about wars, which sometimes interested me, but other times, I didn't really care about school back then, so most of the time it didn't. Um, but yeah, you gotta run to do as your nature demands of you, or it's just clear you don't love yourself enough, and I believe that's powerful. Every time I live outside of the accordance, every time I live not in accordance with my nature, and I tell myself you don't love yourself enough. I've changed so many bad habits from telling myself I don't love myself enough. And me saying that to myself comes from a place of love because I want to love myself. I seek my own approval. I want to be able to say that I'm a person that, I would want to be friends with. I want to say I'm a person who is seen as beautiful in the eyes of God. I want to seek my own approval. And when I don't do things to live in, when I don't live in accordance with my nature and what it demands of me, I don't love myself. And telling yourself you don't love yourself is powerful. Like I said, I've quit some of my worst habits. I've changed so much after reading that line from Marcus Aurelius saying you don't love yourself enough. And having the context of meditations before you read it is so powerful. Not reading it, getting defensive. You don't love yourself enough or you do what your nature demands. That is not something to get defensive about, especially when you read it in meditations, because it's Marcus Aurelius telling it to himself. You think, wow, that's deep. Maybe I don't love myself enough because I'm not running to do what my nature demands. And Marcus Aurelius sets this when he's talking about getting up in the morning, I believe. When he's in the beginning of book 5, when he's telling himself, you know, why are you laying in bed? And he's conversating back and forth with himself, like, it's comfortable here. And it's like, well, were you born to be comfortable? And he's like, well, I need sleep. And it's like, yes, you've had enough sleep though. Get up and live your life. If you loved yourself enough, you would be running. You'd be running to live life, to do as your nature demands you. Keeping promises to yourself is so valuable. Like, imagine if you had a friend and every time you made plans, they bailed on you. Every time they showed up late, very late, or they just wouldn't show up, or they'd ghost you and text you a couple days later and tell you sorry. It's like you wouldn't be friends that much longer. You wouldn't put up with it. But we do that to ourselves. We treat ourselves like a bad friend. We tell ourselves no more, and then we do it. We tell ourselves, I will do this, and then we don't. And that's why we don't love ourselves. That's why we can't look in the mirror and say, you're a person I approve of. That's why we have no confidence when we say, I'm going to stick to this diet. I'm going to stop. I'm going to quit nicotine. I'm going to quit weed. This is why we have no confidence in ourselves. It's just fake. It's ego. It's fake confidence. If you say it confidently and you have you don't have a stack of undeniable proof that you are disciplined and that you do what you say you're going to do. When you don't have that proof, it's just your ego. And when you go into endeavors with your ego, it's bound to lose its footing eventually. You need more than just your ego. You need confidence, and confidence comes from a stack of undeniable truth. And if you don't have that yet, then understand that and be humble. Give it your all. Yes, you need to have some confidence. I don't think the ego is completely bad. If your first time ever doing something and you have no confidence because you have no proof to back it up, yeah, drizzling a little bit of your ego into the situation will help. But balance it out with humility, and balance it out with the knowledge of knowing that you're in new waters. You need to walk confidently, but you also need to walk cautiously. Another paradoxical thing for you. As I said at the start of this video, I think so often we know what we need to do. So often We know what our nature demands of us, and so often we don't do it. So often we cope and rationalize that that's not what I need to do, even though deep down you know it is. And it never ends up well when you cope like that and you don't engage in an activity that you know you must do. We are known by our actions, and that's why you can live your whole life without being your true self. Because if your true self is outgoing and you were raised shy, if you live your whole life shy, were you outgoing? You lived your whole life, if you all your actions resemble that of a person who's shy, just because your true self is outgoing doesn't mean you're outgoing. You're known by your actions. And I don't mean known by the outside world. You're that too. But more importantly, you're known by yourself, by your actions. You're known by yourself that you don't keep your word to yourself when you don't keep your word to yourself. You're known by yourself to be disciplined when you keep your word. You're known by yourself to do hard things when you do hard things. You're known by your actions. And if you want to be known as a person you love, you have to make your actions in accordance with your nature. And if they're not, you're going to be known as a person you hate. And that's all that matters. You could be known as a person you hate, and the world could love you. But who cares? As Jesus says, what's worth gaining the whole world if you lose your soul? What's the point? What's the point of external validation and social validation when you don't have your own validation? I forget who says it, but a Stoic says, you uh, you care. I think Marcus says it. You care what these people think. People who can't even live up to their own expectations. Think about the people you care about their opinions. Can they even live up to their own expectations? They say they're going on a diet, and then a week later, they're done. They say they're quitting nicotine, and then a week later, they're back using nicotine. They say they're going to start going to the gym, and then a week later, they're not going to the gym. And then they come at you and they criticize you, and you care while you're upholding your own values, while you're being true to yourself. You care what a person who doesn't even know what their true self wants cares about you. You know, it's insanity. Now I urge you to love yourself. And I don't, I mean, if it's not clear enough by now, I don't mean it in the terms that people use nowadays, like, oh, you should love yourself and, you know, positivity, positivity. I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to be like a nihilist or anything, but no, no. If you are not living in accordance with your nature and you hate yourself, that's good. Because if you do and you somehow trick yourself into loving yourself, you're going to live an unauthentic life. And you can trick yourself by this world giving you validation. But deep down, you know you're coping. And I would rather you hate yourself then falsely love yourself. Because if you hate yourself, you can truly love yourself. But if you falsely love yourself, then you'll truly hate yourself. And, you'll probably figure it out too late. Once you're old, and so many people who have died and forgotten who you are, and no one really cares about you anymore, and you're on your own, you'll realize you lived a life, a lie, and you'll wish you were a little harsher to yourself, and you would wish you figured out who your true authentic self was. And that's the difference between people who people think it's nice to tell people that what they want to hear, but that's so mean. Someone comes up to you and asks you like, hey, am I overweight? And you look at them and they're like 300 pounds. Yes. Yes, you're obese. You're going to die sooner than you would if you were healthier. Obviously, unless a crazy event happens, but you're deliberately killing yourself. Slowly, but deliberately. And if you sit there and tell them, oh no, you're beautiful, like, the body positivity movement, it's like, that's mean. You're killing them. Maybe if they got the truth right then and there, they would have changed their life. They would have gained discipline. They would have started going to the gym, eating healthy. Their brain would have been working better. Their body would have been working better. They wouldn't have been sore all the time. They would have found passions that they loved that they never even tried because of how overweight they were. So there's a difference between I was going to say there's a difference between being kind and there's a difference between being nice. But it's hard to define them separately because they really are like the same thing. But you know what I'm getting at. In terms of to get my point across, I think these can be interchanged, but being nice is telling somebody no, yeah, I think more of like being kind is telling someone, you're not that overweight or you're not overweight. But being nice is telling them that they're overweight. And you should want to be nice. You shouldn't want to be kind. And like I said, don't quote me, don't hold me to that because I know that doesn't really work. But I think that was just to get my point across. And I think you know what I mean. There's a difference. And you should want to be the person who tells people hard truths to hopefully change their life and help them in the long run instead of giving them a moment of, false happiness that is going to lead them to a worse life in an early grave, potentially. Start loving yourself, for nobody else. For no one else should you love yourself other than yourself. Oneself should be lifted up by oneself. And if you truly loved yourself, you would be running to do as your nature demands.